The morning mist clung to the tall grass like a whispered secret, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth. On the edge of a quiet ranch nestled in the rolling hills of Montana, Evan Carter stepped out into the crisp dawn air, a man in his early 40s. He had spent most of his life alone since leaving the Army, finding peace in the silence of the wilderness. His home wasn't just a ranch. It was a sanctuary for animals in need. As Evan adjusted the saddle on his horse, midnight, a faint cry cut through the stillness. It was soft, almost lost in the wind, but unmistakable. Someone or something was in trouble. He froze, instincts sharpened from years of service, snapping into place. His eyes scanned the horizon, ears straining for another sound. There was again, not the howl of a coyote or the call of a bird, but a cry of fear, a cry for help. Without hesitation, Evan mounted Midnight and urged him forward. The powerful black stallion responded instantly, galloping toward the source of sound. As they neared the swampy land at the far end of the property, the urgency in Evan's chest grew. Then he saw it, a small foal, barely more than a baby, trapped in the mud. Its tiny legs were sinking deeper with every frantic movement. The muck clung to its coat, pulling it down, threatening to swallow it whole. Its wide, terrified eyes met Evan's as he dismounted in one swift motion. He grabbed a rope from his saddle and edged closer to the edge of the swamp. The ground beneath him shifted dangerously, but he didn't stop, looping the rope carefully around the foal's front legs. He called out, voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. Easy, easy, little guy. I got you. The foal panicked, thrashing wildly, but Evan held firm. Sweat beaded on his brow as he pulled with all his strength. Midnight, sensing the danger, moved beside him, adding his own weight to the effort. With one final pull, the mud released its grip. The foal collapsed onto solid ground, trembling, exhausted. Evan fell back, breathing hard, watching as the young horse struggled to catch its breath. Slowly, the Mustang lifted its head, meeting Evan's gaze. Something passed between them then, an understanding, a bond neither expected. Evan reached out, fingers grazing the foal's soaked mane. You're safe now. But he had no idea that this rescue was only the beginning. The foal lay shaking on the ground, its chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Evan crouched beside it, heart still racing. Mud clung to its dark coat, hiding the true beauty beneath. Too young to be alone, too fragile to survive long without help. Gently, he reached out again, brushing his fingers along the foal's neck. The foal flinched instinctively, but didn't pull away. It tried to stand, legs wobbling, but quickly gave up. Exhaustion won over instinct. Easy, Evan murmured. You don't need to run. You're safe now. The foal's ears flicked, listening, but its eyes remained filled with fear. Evan glanced at Midnight, who stood nearby, watching silently. Horses understood things humans couldn't always explain, and Midnight knew this moment mattered. Evan looked around. There was no sign of a herd nearby. Had the foal been separated? Had something spooked the band, forcing them to leave it behind? Either way, the foal wouldn't last long alone. The nearest wild horses roamed miles away, and the swamp would mask any scent trail. If the foal's mother was still searching, she might never find her lost child. Evan sighed, pushing himself up. All right, kid. Looks like you're coming with me. The foal flinched again, trying to move, but its legs gave out. Evan untied the rope from his saddle and looped it loosely around the foal's neck. He didn't want to scare it, but he needed to guide it home. With slow, steady movements, he tugged gently. At first, the foal resisted, but after a few shaky steps, it followed. That's it. Come on, you can do this. Midnight snorted softly, as if approving. The journey back to the ranch was slow, the foal needing frequent rests. It had fought for its life today, and survived. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the land. The air smelled of hay and pine, a stark contrast to the swamp's decay. Midnight walked toward his paddock, done for the day. But Evan turned toward the barn. The foal needed warmth, food, rest. Inside, Evan spread fresh hay in an open stall and removed the rope. To his surprise, the foal didn't bolt. Maybe exhaustion kept it grounded, or maybe, just maybe, it was starting to trust him. He filled a bucket with water and placed it near the foal. It hesitated, then lowered its head and took a long, shaky sip. Good, Evan murmured, watching closely. The foal's body relaxed slightly, realizing, for the first time, that it was safe. Evan leaned against the stall door, studying the young horse. It was small but strong. A fighter. You need a name, he mused aloud. After a moment, he smirked. Storm. It was fitting. The foal had survived the storm that nearly took its life. And somehow, Evan had a feeling this little Mustang had a lot more fight left in him. What he didn't know was that this was just the beginning. Storm wasn't just any foal. What he would do in the coming months would leave Evan speechless. Night fell quietly over the ranch, but sleep eluded Evan. He sat outside Storm's stall, watching over the fragile foal as it shifted uneasily in the hay. Every so often, Storm let out soft whinnies, his legs twitching as if still trapped in the swamp. Still fighting, even in his dreams. Evan rubbed a tired hand over his face. He had seen this kind of trauma before, not just in animals, but in people too. Those who had fought to survive carried their battles long after they were safe. The barn was dimly lit by a single lantern, casting flickering shadows along the walls. The scent of hay mixed with the lingering musk of swamp water. Storm stirred again, adjusting to the warmth of the barn. He was clean now. Evan had wiped away the thick mud that once covered him. Beneath the grime was a sleek, dark coat, a true wild Mustang. Despite the foal's exhaustion, there was still fire in his eyes, and Evan knew that fire wouldn't burn out easily. Morning came with a challenge. At dawn, a rooster's call echoed across the ranch. Evan stretched, muscles stiff from sleeping on the barn floor. He pushed himself up, rolled his shoulders, and checked on Storm. The foal blinked sleepily at him, but didn't move much, clearly still recovering. Morning, kid, Evan said softly, crouching by the stall door. How we feeling? Storm flicked his ears but didn't answer, which made Evan chuckle. He grabbed a small bucket of milk replacer and set it near the foal. This would be a test. Would Storm accept help, or would the wild in him refuse? Storm eyed the bucket warily. Instinct told him to seek his mother's milk, but she wasn't here. The smell of the formula wasn't the same, and his hesitation made Evan's stomach twist. Come on, Storm. Evan coaxed him gently. I know it's not what you're used to, but it's what you need. Storm lowered his head slightly, sniffing the unfamiliar scent. For a moment, Evan thought he'd reject it, but then, slowly, he began to drink. Relief washed over Evan. There you go, buddy. That's it. You're a fighter, huh? Storm kept drinking, visibly relaxing as nourishment settled into his empty belly. This was a good sign. But just as Evan was beginning to feel at ease, a sudden sound startled them both. A distant neigh, sharp, urgent. Storm's ears shot up. In an instant, he was on his feet. Evan stood too, his gut twisting. That wasn't midnight. That was wild. The band. His breath caught in his throat. If the band was nearby, it meant Storm's mother might still be out there, searching for him. Evan moved toward the barn door, stepping outside into the golden morning light. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of dew and dust. His eyes scanned the land, pulse quickening. And then he saw them, a group of wild mustangs standing just beyond the tree line. A dozen powerful, untamed horses. Their muscles rippled beneath sunlit coats. And at the front, a mare. Her coat matched Storm's. Storm let out a shrill whinny, pressing against the stall door. His mother had come for him. Evan felt torn. He had rescued the foal, fought to keep him alive. But Storm was wild. He didn't belong in a barn. His place was with his band. The mare called again, desperate. Her cry filled the morning air. Storm's little body trembled with instinct, his heart pulling him toward the only family he had ever known. Evan's throat tightened. Was this it? Was he about to let him go? Storm's mother stood at the edge of the trees, muscles tensed, eyes locked on the foal inside the barn. Behind her, the rest of the band waited, their bodies still, ears flicking as they watched the scene unfold. Storm pawed at the ground, anxious. his body torn between the safety of the barn and the call of the wild. Evan felt a lump form in his throat. He had spent the last day and night fighting to save his foal, bringing him back from the brink of death. And now he was faced with the reality of what had to happen. Storm belonged to the wild. Evan had always known it. But somehow, it didn't make this moment any easier. He stepped forward, boots crunching softly on the hay-covered floor. "All right, kid, you got a choice to make." Storm turned to look at him, dark eyes uncertain. Evan reached for the stall door, fingers hovering over the latch. One movement, and Storm would be free. One movement, and Evan would be letting go of something he hadn't even realized he wanted to hold on to. Storm let out another high-pitched whinny. His mother answered back, stepping forward. She wasn't going to wait forever. Evan inhaled deeply, steadying himself. He knew what he had to do. With a final glance at the foal, he pulled the stall door open. Storm hesitated for half a second. Then he bolted. His legs wobbled slightly as he ran, but the moment his hooves hit the open field, the hesitation was gone. He ran with everything he had, straight toward his mother. She rushed forward, meeting him halfway, her powerful body lowering as she nuzzled her lost foal. The relief in her movements was undeniable. Evan stood motionless, watching them reunite. A mix of emotions pulled at his chest. This was right. This was how it was supposed to be. The band shifted, moving around the pair protective. The stallion at the front, likely their leader, snorted before turning back toward the trees. The others followed suit. Storm's mother nudged him toward the herd, urging him forward. But Storm hesitated. For a moment, his head turned back toward Evan. Their eyes met, and for a brief second, Evan swore he saw something in Storm's gaze. A flicker of understanding. A silent thank you. Then, without another sound, Storm turned and ran after Band, disappearing into the forest. Just like that. He was gone. Evan let out a slow breath, his chest tight. He had done the right thing. He knew that. But why did it feel like he had just lost something? The ranch felt different after Storm left. The barn was quieter. The mornings emptier. Evan told himself it was for the best. But the hollow feeling in his chest told a different story. He went about his daily routine, feeding the horses, checking the fences, tending to the land. But his mind always drifted back to the small foal he had pulled from the swamp. Storm was where he belonged. That thought should have brought peace. Instead, it brought a strange restlessness. Evan had spent years living alone, avoiding attachments, keeping people, and even animals at a distance. It was easier that way. Life had already taken too much from him. But Storm had broken through those walls without even trying. And now he was gone. Weeks passed. The land shifted from the cool breezes of early autumn to the bitter chill winter. One evening, Evan stood on the porch, wrapped in an old coat, breath fogging in the crisp air. The sun had set behind distant hills, painting the sky in deep purples and oranges. The wind howled across the open plains, rattling the barn doors. Midnight stood in the paddock, ears flicking toward the darkness beyond the ranch. Restless tonight, Evan frowned. Something was off. The wind carried a sound, distant but distinct. A whinny. His heart skipped a beat. He turned sharply, scanning the tree line. The sound came again, carried by the wind. Then movement. A dark shape emerged from the trees. Silhouette barely visible in the moonlight. Evan squinted. His pulse quickened. The shape grew clearer as it stepped into the open. His breath caught in his throat. It was Storm, but he wasn't alone. Behind him, more figures appeared. The entire band of Mustangs had returned. Evan stood frozen as the wild horses moved toward the ranch, their presence almost ghostly in the silver light. Why were they here? Why had they come back? Storm led the way, his body stronger now, legs no longer shaky and uncertain. He had grown. The stallion at the back of the herd snorted, watching Evan closely. The other Mustangs followed suit, tense but calm. They weren't afraid. They had come with purpose. Storm stopped a few feet from Evan. His dark eyes met his once more, the same eyes that had looked back at him the day he left. A silent understanding passed between them. And Evan realized in that moment, Storm had chosen to come back. The foal had found his family. But something had pulled him back here. Maybe it was unfinished business. Maybe it was something else entirely. Evan took a slow step forward, the cold air stinging his skin. "What are you doing here, kid?" he murmured. Storm nickered softly, lifting his head. The band didn't move. They were waiting, watching. And Evan had a feeling something incredible was about to happen. Daniel had always believed in setting animals free, letting nature take its course. He had spent his whole life avoiding attachment. Yet here he was, standing in front of a young Mustang that had defied every natural instinct to return to him. The stallion behind Storm let out a deep, guttural snort. He stomped his hoof against the cold earth. His gaze locked onto Daniel. It was a test. The dominant stallion wasn't here to attack. He was here to see if Daniel was worthy. Daniel swallowed hard, understanding what was happening. The band had accepted Storm back into the wild. But Storm had never truly left Daniel behind. And now the Mustangs were waiting for his answer. Did Daniel have the heart to let him go again? Or was there something bigger at play? Something even the wild horses understood? Daniel let out a shaky breath. His gut told him to do what he had always done. Walk away. Let Storm return to his world. But for the first time in years, he didn't want to. He crouched down slowly, extending his hand toward the foal. Storm watched him for a long moment, then closed the distance. He pressed his muddy nose against Daniel's palm, exhaling softly. Daniel's throat tightened. This was Storm's choice. The stallion gave one last snort, then turned, leading the band back toward the forest. The other Mustangs followed. Storm did not. Daniel looked into the foal's deep, intelligent eyes and knew Storm had made his decision. The Mustang had found his place, and it wasn't in the wild. It was here, with him. The wind howled softly through the valley. The band disappeared into the darkness, their silhouettes blending into the vast wilderness. Only one remained. Storm stood motionless in the open field, his dark eyes locked onto Daniel's. Daniel exhaled slowly, his breath visible in the cold night air. He had spent his entire life believing that wild things should remain wild, that nature had a way of knowing what was best. But this time was different. Storm had made his choice. He wasn't just a lost foal anymore. He wasn't broken or afraid. He had found his way back, not because he had to, because he wanted to. And Daniel, for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone. The young Mustang took a hesitant step forward. Then another. His legs, once weak and wobbly, now carried him with newfound strength. Daniel extended a hand, palm open, inviting rather than commanding. Storm hesitated, ears flicking forward. Then, in a moment so subtle yet powerful, he stepped forward, pressed his nose into Daniel's roughened palm. That was it. No rope, no saddle, no command, just a silent agreement. A bond that didn't need words. Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Guess you made up your mind, huh?" Storm snorted softly, shaking his mane. Daniel smirked. "Yeah, thought so." Midnight, who had been watching from the paddock, let out a deep nicker, as if acknowledging the decision. Daniel looked at the ranch behind him, then back at Storm. He had spent so much time thinking he needed to be alone, that his life was meant to be lived in solitude. But now he wasn't so sure. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Winter passed. Spring arrived, bringing life back to the valley. Storm had become more than just a rescued foal. He had become a part of the ranch, a part of Daniel's life. He still carried the spirit of the wild within him. He would never be fully tamed. And Daniel didn't want him to be. Some things weren't meant to be broken. Instead, Storm grew into his own, running free across the open fields during the day, returning to the barn at night. He had found a balance between both worlds, one foot in the wild, the other with Daniel. And Daniel, well, he had found something too, a reminder that some bonds, no matter how unexpected, are meant to last forever. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, Daniel leaned against the fence, watching Storm gallop through the fields. His muscles rippled under the fading light, his mane catching the wind as he ran. Midnight stood beside Daniel, steady and familiar. Daniel smiled to himself. He had rescued Storm from the swamp that day, but in a way, Storm had rescued him too. The young Mustang had shown him something he hadn't realized he needed, a reason to believe in something again. And as Storm turned his head toward him, letting out a sharp, joyful whinny, before kicking up his heels and bolting across the land, Daniel knew one thing for certain. Some souls are meant to run free, but that doesn't mean they have to run alone. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe, and share this video with someone who loves horses and inspiring stories. Let's keep spreading the message of resilience, trust, and the wild spirit that lives in all of us.